Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I got some guys.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Brandon Winford. I'm an assistant professor here at the University of Tennessee. I just want to welcome you to the Civil Rights Journey Continues Roundtable. First of all, I just want to really give the McClung Museum staff, its volunteers, its supporters a round of applause for a great Family Day. So we can just acknowledge I think this is my third time actually having an opportunity to see the exhibit itself, so I've been really impressed by it. And I also think we should acknowledge Miss Valentine. Is it, you hear me now? Okay. Yeah. Ms. Jo Valentine, she's responsible for putting together this panel, among other things related to the exhibit and some of the activities around here. So if you all just give her a round of applause. And so we have about an hour today, so I want to make sure that we maximize our time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce all the panelists. So when your name is called, if you could just wave to the audience. Whenever you respond to a question, I think that'll be a good opportunity if you want to say something about yourself. Please feel free to do that. So we have a diverse group of panelists. We have elders from the Knoxville community, and we also have at least 3 students from the University of Tennessee on the panel as well. And I'm going to just sort of introduce them. Robert Mitchell. Okay. You know what? That was my other words. All right. Dewey Roberts. Doris Taylor, who's waiting. Audrey West. Janice Hall. Tommy Carter. Deborah Wagner. Vicki McClung. Erica Littlejohn. Mustafa Ali Smith. And Carmen Danley. And Dalton Till. I have a few comments before I sort of jump into the bulk of the questioning. And just for our panelists, what we're going to do is we're going to break this discussion down into 3 parts. I'm going to begin by asking you questions that have you reflect on the exhibit. So for those of you who have a chance to take in the exhibit, I'm going to ask you questions that really kind of reflect on the exhibit. Then we're going to jump into reflections on the civil rights movement and its legacies. And then I'd like for us to have some questions from the audience. And again, this is going to be a free-flowing conversation and dialogue, so I'm not going to be beholden to my questions, so we're going to let it flow in that manner. So I hope you all had a good time today with Family Day activities. I just want to sort of make a note about sort of why we're here in the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was one of the most important and powerful and effective social movements in the history of the world. It was a moment in history where African Americans, through mobilization and organization, the massive network of resources, directly and openly challenged the social, political, and economic system that had successfully cast them aside as inferior beings. It sought to eliminate racial and economic inequality with the purpose of obtaining the full measure of citizenship rights for African Americans guaranteed to them by the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And it became a global phenomenon which inspired more expansive domestic and international struggles for human rights. The civil rights movement was a combination of continuous agitation at the local, state, and national levels. It simultaneously employed a variety of strategies and tactics, including nonviolence, militancy, interracial collaborations, legal pressure, negotiations, and faith by women, by men, by Black Americans and other oppressed people of color, whites, poor and non-poor, young and old, from north and south. And it took more than the media portrayals of violence by way of television to destroy a deeply rooted way of life and thinking. And so more was needed in order to get the country to think beyond just sort of having this sort of moral consciousness. And this all was really shaped by organized mobilization decades in the making. So I just want to sort of make that point before we really sort of begin. So I want to begin again, reflections on the exhibit for all the world to see. And I want our participants, our panel, to think about, is there a part of the exhibit, if you think about what you saw, that brought back some memories for you from that particular period? And I wouldn't mind if you just shared some of what those memories are. If you just sort of think about what you saw in the exhibit, was there anything in the exhibit that sort of got you to reflect on your memories during this particular period?
The March on Washington, I remember that from when I was about 6 or 7, because my father, he went to Washington with his brothers. His brothers all lived in Alabama, and my uncles and his and my mom put them together to go to Washington, and now I traveled in a caravan to Washington,
Can you say a little bit more about that experience and sort of watching them as a child, watching them sort of get together? What did you know about that? What was happening from that experience?
I knew my father was very organized and activist in movements at the time. And in school, we were all, in those years, in school, we were in a segregated school, not from the elementary. And I remember every year we had signed up for NAA, so we had one of those years. And nowadays, you probably really think that because it's not in schools. And it was just a whole different atmosphere back then, anticipation and hope. And it was nervousness also. So, because you didn't know what was going to happen when they got to Washington. It was going to be peaceful.
I remember going to elementary school here. They were very, very organized. Miss Seymour Green was very pivotal in our communities. All of the NAACP people had reps at the schools. The parents were notified of everything that was going to be done. And when we had visitors in our home, my parents went to school in Nashville, so we had a lot of guests from out of town. They were constantly discussing what they were doing in the various cities where they lived. So we knew all about the marches. We took food to the park when the people came through. They stayed at Jacobsville. We were always there.
Tell us a little bit about something in the exhibit that really sort of stood out to you and sort of got you thinking about particular memories.
Well, I like to say that I experienced event in Clinton, Tennessee, the Clinton 12, and I lived in Clinton at that time, and it was very, very scary, and we were worried about our families. They would put bombs in trash cans and shattered our windows, and it was just an awful time. I should say the soldiers. Yeah, National Guard. It was much needed at that time because everybody was just frightened, and the place that I lived, there was our people were all out with guns, and we had to go to the church, so it was an awful time.
So, I'm just speaking from right here. I can let my voice carry as well. The exhibit itself, I guess, brought back different memories. Some were good memories, some were sad memories. The entertainment and the film with the entertainment, I thought that was just right on point because that brought back, a good feeling of those that you got to see on television, on the Ed Sullivan Show, a lot of times, because the media for us was either television, black and white, of course, the newspaper, or magazines. So those were the things that I saw over there. And if you got to the Ebony magazine or the Jet magazine, you got to see a lot of the things that were going on nationally around the country. But for the most part, it would have to be those three medias. There weren't a whole lot of things that, of course, telephone, some of us didn't even have a telephone. And those of us that did, you may have a party line, so, you could only be on the telephone for so long. But there were just some good things. I saw, I think, garden parks, breaking into the movies. There were just different magazines, the Life magazine showing Medgar Everett's son and his wife when he had gotten shot. Of course, he was active in the NAACP, and I heard Ms. Tommy say, well, we don't hardly hear about the NAACP here anymore. Well, Ms. Tommy, I guess that would be my fault. I'm the first vice president of the NAACP. So, I won't take all the blame, but we meet every first Thursday at the bank at 6 o'clock, so I wanted to say that. The UT has a chapter here on campus. We do a lot of things in the community. We don't, I guess you don't hear about us in a lot of things that we do, but things are getting done in the community a lot of times because of the NAACP. Julie Roberts was president for many years, and Sarah Moore Green was president for many years. And so when I think about the NAACP, as David said, I think about my first encounter with the NAACP when I was in the 8th grade and voted president of the NAACP when at Beardsley Junior High School. Some of you all who remember Beardsley Junior High School. We paid our 50 cents as a member, and things got done. So that was because, I guess, the galvanizing of Sarah Moore Green at that time. So definitely, if you want to be a part, 6 o'clock, first Thursdays, the Beck Cultural Center. That's the plug for the NAACP. But it just, getting back to the exhibit, it really just brings back, some good memories sometimes. But the civil rights movement itself doesn't always bring back a lot of good memories, I guess, because of the things that we had to go through and the things that we were fighting for. And I think about the economic part of it. Yes, we are going to the restaurants and we got to, education, we're going to the schools, we're going, but I think about sitting at the table, being able to make the decisions, and not only that, were we able to get a part of the economical or the economics of the civil rights movement. At this point, in my mind, I would say no in terms of economics. Things have happened, people have gotten jobs, and people have gotten, contracts, business contracts, but if you really think about it now, Dr. King said in one of his speeches that there will come a time that America would try to take us back to the 1950s, and I think we see that now. But we have to remember, from that movement, what was going on during that time and trying to push forward during that movement and what that movement meant. So it's really still up to us in terms of education, in terms of jobs, in terms of business, in terms of economics. It's still up to us to make things happen.
One of the things that I remember about what we looked at was the inspiration that the first time we saw African Americans on TV singing and performing and doing different things like that, what that did, it motivated you to say, look, I can do this. I say, so that's what I loved about the exhibit, was seeing the positive part of it, letting you know that once you see someone do something, the same size you are, the same color you are, the same hair you are, that makes you feel that, hey, I can do that. So that's a positive thing that I got from the exhibit.
Now, was there any figure or image in particular that you remember even as a child that you have a particular feeling about? And if so, could you speak on that for us?
Okay. I guess on the Ed Sullivan show, with Diana Ross and the Supremes and different things like that, one of the most interesting things during that time was I was a student here at the University of Tennessee. That was in the early 70s. And one of the things that I learned was at that time, 3 blacks together was considered a riot, and they would call security guards on you. We only had 1 black student union. We had 1 fraternity, AKA, and 1 Q. I also remember that they had a, let's see what they have here, a singing competition. And we applied for the singing competition. But they said we did, for some reason, they said we did not qualify for that. But they had us as entertainment at Negro Spirituals. And so that was what's interesting about the University of Tennessee. I ended up transferring to Tuskegee, but that was the most interesting thing. I also remember that I stayed in Dunford Hall. I don't know if they have that now.
My office is in there.
Okay, Dunford Hall. And a lady came in and said that UT is going down because of the African American students was there. And I remember I had a different color roommate, and her mother took her out of the room because of the complexion of the skin. So it's a lot, but we have grown, I can say right now, as far as getting better and working together. One of the things that I really admired during that time was unity. Every time you saw a fellow student, you would speak to them, see if they needed any help. And there was a whole lot of unity, and as time goes on, unity is not what it used to be. And that's it.
This is not a good one, but just seeing the dogs and the tags, that really hit a sour note with me, because when I was at Mountain View in 2nd grade, I was emceeing a program we had, and the police came in. It was a bunch of police. I couldn't tell you how many, but a lot of police came in, interrupted our program, and proceeded to start beating on the people in the program. And it was because that they knew that there was certain black people at the school. The parents were active in civil rights movements, and that was a bad memory for me, but I never forgot that. And a lot of people went to Mountain View that they don't remember it, but I can't forget because I was on the stage that night.
Listening to people talk about their memories, maybe I'm telling my age, but back when a lot of this was going on, especially when I saw the exhibit regarding Emmett Till, not too many people in my neighborhood even had televisions. They were invented, but not too many people could afford them at that time. But I can recall my parents and my grandparents talking about it, and I remember being afraid. I also remember some nights when we would be in our homes with all the lights off because the Ku Klux Klan would drive up and down the streets through our neighborhoods with their robes on, with the dome lights on in their cars. And I suppose that was supposed to instill fear in us. But I think that was one of the things that galvanized the movement there in our neighborhood, in the community where I lived, where I grew up. And that was one of the things I think when the group there, I don't think it was the NAACP, I don't remember what the name of the group, but they started then a push to start everyone to vote. I remember my parents were some of the few people, of course they were both teachers, they both had college, they both graduated from Knoxville College. And they were some of the first African Americans in our community to vote. So that's one of the things, kind of a bittersweet memory that I have, the fear, because that young boy was so violently murdered. But then to see what came of that as a result. So,
Carolyn, did they teach you about this at the house? Is this a story your parents told you? We saw this on the news with them about MT.
We were talking about it. My parents and my grandparents were talking about it. Now, one thing too, speaking of television, that later on when more and more people began to afford them, we could watch the shows, like you say, the Ed Sullivan and things like that, but anytime there was a report of something that Dr. King was doing or some of these civil, there would always be a problem with the transmission. It just always just, you know, the test pattern would come on. So you just never would see that. So, but yeah, this was one of the things that was talked about in our home, but it wasn't widely broadcast over the airwaves.
Do you remember seeing Birmingham on TV almost every night with the police dogs, the water hoses?
I don't remember. Like I said, there weren't a whole lot of TVs around in people's homes in my childhood.
Yeah, I lived right here in Knoxville. We could see it. We had dinner at that time, and there was a constant watch going on about Birmingham. So when they bombed the church in Birmingham, we were all...
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
We
remember
always
that.
had teachers that had come from Birmingham. Everybody knew someone that went to that church. We're connected people.
Mm-hmm.
We're connected people, and people have to realize that words travel fast.
And of course, I grew up in Alabama. I'm not from Tennessee.
Tell them where you're
So
from.
Selma.
Selma, Alabama.
Just one quick observation, again, from the exhibit, and that is the Black Panthers. Of course, I graduated from UT right here and started in 1970. I started to say 0800, but it was 1970. And it was a different experience, especially when you grow up here in this city and in segregated schools all of your life. But by the time I reached junior in high school, it was I guess the era where it said, and I remember seeing James Brown in the clip as well, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. So as we grew and I came here to the university, that was in my mind because that was the song that just resonated, you know, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. I won't go there, I'm sorry. See, that was a good memory. See, it took me back. That was a good memory. But anyway, I got here at UT, and because of that, and because of Angela Davis, and she was here a few years ago, and she was my idol, because of that, I had that militarism attitude. And so I was very pro-black, very pro, you know, being a little militant here on the campus of 25,000 white folk. So, but you know, you did it in a way that, as someone said earlier, there was camaraderie and there was unity. But the clip with the Black Panthers really, I guess that made me feel, if I can say that, it was a proud feeling because it wasn't that they were so militant and you know just carrying their guns in the street. It's about what they stood for initially, and that was feeding children in California and the breakfast programs and the school programs and all the things that they stood for. Now it got, you know, turned topsy-turvy and upside down when they said, you know, it was their right to carry, you know, to bear arms, and things got turned upside down. But that was a good feeling for me to know what the Black Panthers originally stood for.
Rights activism and things of that nature. What were some of those things that you got from your family, from your community that held tightly, you hold tightly to today?
Well, let me say briefly, I was recruited into the civil rights movement in the early 60s. So I demonstrated, you know, and it was just a different era. You know, my father was sort of like a civil rights pioneer. He fought for equal established some teachers here in Austin, spread across the country. But, you know, it was a time where that's what we did. And in high school, you know, Avon Robinson kind of proved this thing. And you don't really, you just knew that things had to change and you wanted to be a part of it. And so my experience spans from my early years to being president of the NAACP for 20 years almost. And what I saw is this history that we just saw over there. If we don't, one thing I realized is if we don't learn to study, we will eventually end up having to repeat it again. And so, you know, I think the difference between in the 60s when we had some good successes for sure. But when I took over the NAACP in 1990, there was still discrimination widespread here in Knox County. We found that the high schools, the high schools were just being discriminated against. One, I know Austin East High School, when they ordered new equipment, they were sending equipment from Powell High School to Austin East and send the secondhand, and send back Powell High School new furniture. So we see that no matter, that discrimination was so overt, we fought in the 90s to get a police review board here, you know, because it was kind of proactive because it really hadn't gotten as bad as it has been in recent years. But anyway, like I said, what I've learned over the years, and just from my experience, is that, like I said, if we don't read, understand, and treasure history, we're bound to repeat it. So we just have to be diligent and vigilant and make sure that I've been to several marches in D.C., have participated not just on 63, but the Black Men's March, Big Men March, and participated in that. But again, you know, all these things, they evolve, but we have to continue to just be vigilant, because we see a trend now that's kind of going back to the 50s and 60s, and we're not very vigilant about that. Those things will, you know, it won't be as drastic, but it is, I can't even say that. It might be, but again, like I said, I love this exhibit here, and also exhibits, I've been to exhibits from D.C. to Montgomery, and all of them just stark reminders that we just have to, if you don't know your history, you don't have a problem in the future.
All right, as far as my family, my grandparents they were the only blacks in the neighborhood of a working family, and it took a lot for my grandfather to be able to get that plot of land. They had crosses burned in their yard several times, and it was a family, their family was a large family. They had mostly brothers, and they would have to sit at night. I think finally before the police, they would come by there and just look to see if they see a cross burn, but they would see the evidence. We had the Klansmen in the yard, but my grandfather stood his ground, and his 6 brothers stayed. They watched night and day with shotguns for about 3 months, and all 6 of his brothers stood against the whites that were doing this, and they actually got together and they helped found it, what is now Foster Chapel Baptist Church. Our family is rooted and grounded in that church, and that church was a staple of voting and keeping a community together. And it still is today.
And could you all talk a little bit about those institutions like her family's church that were sort of centers of the civil rights movement, with civil rights activism, organizing on the local level? Could you all sort of speak to that?
Back during the 60s,
particularly here in Knoxville?
Of course in Knoxville. I'll start with the First United Presbyterian Church of Knoxville College, Mount Calvary Baptist Church here in Knoxville, where Martin Luther King's father spoke frequently. But at that time, they had a meeting that they called a mass meeting. It would be held in many of the black churches. That was your point of organization, so that you could keep people informed on what we were going to do. There was lots of boycotting, and it worked. It definitely worked. Most of the churches here were involved with the NAACP. They had it all the way down. You know, churches, schools, our Greek organizations, everybody was doing something. Then in the home, your parents were also doing it. Don't forget, we have multicultural homes. My family has Catholic, Baptist, Presbyterian, and Muslim. So when I go to Chicago, I know that I'm going to be on the south side with my Muslim relatives. My mom and dad taught me how I was to behave, the things that we were supposed to do, how to respect them, how to go into the mosque, how to sit down. Each moment, when things came up, when I was growing up, my parents used those moments to teach us how they affected us, how we were supposed to do. That's why I live in 64.
The statue is in my front yard. I saw the statue, these people tearing down this house. And this jockey was in the front yard. And they were taking everything away except that statue, so I asked for it. And the man looked at me, he said, yeah, we don't want it. Well, that was a couple weeks ago. I was sitting on my steps talking to Miss Valentine. And this gentleman came down the street in his car. And I mean, he put it in reverse and backed up. He said, hey, he said, would you be interested in selling that statue in your yard? I said, no, sir, I'm not. So if you come down my street and you see a white jockey in the front yard, that's my house. But getting back to segregation, my father helped build this university over here. And he said sometimes it took all he could to come to work. He was building a place where his children couldn't come. He was building for somebody else. My mother worked as a maid in Melrose Hollow. And those guys, they treated her just like their mother, because she had more boys than she did girls. So it was one student, I remember, he was sleeping on under mattress covers because he didn't have linen for his bed. And at the time, the dollar store was the foundation. She went and bought him 2 sets of sheets, a quilt and a bedspread, and he was white. She didn't care what color he was. If it was something she could do for you, she did it. But my father, he worked for KUB. And every year, they would have a company picnic in Concord. Blacks would be up at Clark, Howland Park. And whites would be down the road at Clark, Concord. And to this day, I won't tell my age, but to this day, I'm not comfortable going to Concord Park. Because we always had Clark, Howland Park. We swam that old nasty river. You know, we had family picnics there. One of the biggest things was my father had one of those old-fashioned wood pounding station wagon. And he would cram 8 of us in that station wagon, him and my mom. A watermelon in a tub of ice in the back. Some bologna sandwiches, and we'd go to Concord. That was our alley. We went to Concord Park. Clark Howland. And what gets me now is, since they build up around there so much, I took my grandkids for a ride one time, and I said, after I moved back here from Ohio, I said, I wonder what it is, what it looks like down there now. And we went down, we stopped and bought some potato chips and some cold drinks, and we went to Allen Park. And I was sitting up on the table while they were swinging, playing on the playground. And this deputy sheriff had the nerve to come to me and ask me, did I have reservations to be in the park? I said, I beg your pardon? Reservations for what? Well, if you come down here for a picnic, you have to have a reservation. I said, I paid my taxes, that's what reservations enough. I looked at him, he looked at me, and I sit there and ate my baked potato chips and watched my grandkids play.
When we were young, we were always had fostered in us a sense of unity, a sense of sticking together, a sense of family, looking out for one another. It was our obligation as a people, because we were a family. We were taught that in the home, we were taught that in the church, we were taught that in the segregated schools, and we were taught that in the communities, because as a rule we lived in the same community. We weren't all scattered out like we were now. The schools were not segregated. It's almost as if, when segregation started, it was with the thought, let's divide. We divide them, we can conquer. And so we were divided, and somewhere along the line, we lost that sense of being our brother's keeper, or being responsible for, looking to help somebody up, and started viewing that as, if we do those types of things, it's like you're giving handouts, and that's not what it was. If I've made it, I don't remember that you had it. If I've made it, it's up to you to make it too, instead of me sharing with you, how it was that I made it. And one reason I think that is, another reason I think that is because, we didn't have as many churches as we have now back then. Now there's a church on every corner, whereas then, you might even have to travel, a little ways to go to church. But now you look around, I think Knoxville right now has more churches per mile than any other, per capita than any other county in the United States. And like Deb was saying, there has to be some kind of way to, we don't want to be militants, we want to effect change, and we want to get together, some kind of way we have to gather, people, like-minded people together. We have to get more people involved in causes today, instead of just being isolated and thinking we're by ourselves.
Because in the 60s, 50s, when I grew up, our community, it was, you had different segments, but the black community as a whole understood and supported each other. And in our neighborhood, you'd have a doctor, lawyer, labor, preacher, and all different kind of people living in the same neighborhood. Now, with desegregation, people all over the city. So that unity that we had back then, it was very difficult to pull that back together, and so I think that through the civil rights movement, back to be kind of together, whether you demonstrated or whether you didn't, you had a sense. Emmett Till, I thought about that when you mentioned that, the way most of us saw that, there was a picture in Jet magazine, and that's how we were able to kind of get in ways we were able to keep up with what's going on, and now we just kind of rely on mass media, and we get what we give. So again, we just have to at some point realize that history kind of pulls us together, if nothing else. It is a unifying thing. It does bring back good and bad memories.
And in those churches and those communities, we were taught our history. I have 3 children, and they've never been I hated those black high schools, and that was an experience for them itself. But they've never been in predominantly black schools. They've always been in minority schools that they've gone to, and I have had to teach them myself black history, because it's not taught in the schools that they've attended. And they will look at me sometimes like they say, "Mama, you prejudiced?" but you need to know these things. You need to know what happened. You need to know what I lived through. I lived through my father's, when we're going for a walk, I lived through him stepping off the curb, taking off his hat, and not making eye contact with white people that he passed. Now that was what he did, and that's what he taught his sons to do. And I, for one, said I would never do that. I was glad I wasn't a boy because I said I wouldn't have done that. You know, we would go for rides on Sunday. That was our entertainment because his mom, daddy, 8 kids, and we didn't have a lot of money. He had 2 businesses, but they children didn't, and we would go for rides. You know, I told him I wouldn't. It's being stopped. And my dad drug out of the car and guns put in his head, and him threatened to be killed right in front of his kids and his wife, and we're screaming, you know, please don't kill my dad. And it was just for sport, is all it was. It was just for sport. So I tell them they have to know these things because if they don't, they might fall into the same pattern, the same trap. So they have to know. No, I love all people. I love everybody, but there's some knowledge you need to know, and it's my responsibility to teach it to you. Not the schools, not the churches anymore. It's my responsibility as a parent.
One of the things we end up with CP and the we did try to get them to, they would accommodate everything except teaching Black history. Because I think it's important, not only that we know, but also the white people. And everyone needs to know history, and Black history is part of American history. So, and it should be taught that way.
So let's sort of segue into kind of nearing the end of this conversation, but I want to talk about the Civil Rights Movement and its legacies. You know, we do have 3 students on the panel, and so I kind of want to ask our students, what are some of the ways in which, you know, what you are experiencing and learning right now about the Civil Rights Movement, what kind of lessons do you think that have been discussed will sort of help you sort of figure out and navigate our contemporary challenges? What are some of those challenges as you see them today, and how you, as an individual, seek to sort of address some of those challenges? That's not like a heavy question for the students, but I think they're bright enough they can handle those questions.
Okay, so I think that one of the biggest things, and it's been touched on a lot, is the education of Black history being passed down to this generation, because I know my parents passed that information down to me, but I can't necessarily speak on anyone else and to say that that information has been passed down to them. And so even hearing about NAACP being that catalyst for applying and giving that information to people who needed it, seeing that now, I think we need to figure out how we can make organizations like NAACP, Greek organizations, the churches, bring that community back together, because I think that's extremely important. Hearing you guys talk about how that was, how they were all on the forefront, talking about unity, how they work together. Looking at that now, I don't really see that. I see unity being the biggest problem with today, even being a college student on the University of Tennessee. We talk about how, Mr. McClung, you said that, you know, some people will look down just to not even look at another white person in their eyes. I feel like as a Black student, there's other Black students who do the same thing with people of color. So why is that? Why is it that we see a person of color on campus and don't speak to them? We don't talk to them. We just had an event with Commission for Blacks, connecting Black students, people of color with Black faculty and people of color. And the main thing was, why don't you guys reach out to us? We're here, we're a resource. Why don't you talk to us? And I think the biggest thing, once again, is that unity portion. We feel like we're in competition with one another when we need to be working together. And I think we just need to figure out how we can bring that unity portion back in and to really find the importance in that, because I feel like we kind of lost sight of it.
I oftentimes think of a quote from Martin Luther King where he talks about the most dangerous thing for the freedom for African Americans is not necessarily the KKK, but the moderate white person. the white person who is so comfortable in their privilege that they don't take the opportunity to talk about race and ethnicity, to talk about the African American struggle and the history and the impact that that's had on our culture. I think that Ms. Vicki made a really good point in talking about the fact that it's the parents' responsibility to talk to their children about, the struggle that African Americans and black people have faced in our country. But in that same breath, since we're not learning about it in the schools, I didn't begin to learn about black history until I chose to minor in Africana Studies in college. Because my parents didn't have to talk about race, and so they never did, unless it was in a discriminatory way. And so that's the other thing, is I oftentimes, when I'm in settings where it's majority white people, I talk about race, because there aren't enough white people that are talking about it, and that's what's got to continue to happen as well. So I'm so appreciative to be here and to hear y'all's story. And one other thing that I really was paying attention to is a lot of us college students, this is the first time that we've been politically engaged and that we've paid attention to what's happening in our society and in our culture. I can remember the day after President Trump was elected, the tension that existed on campus. And when I looked at people of color and people from other marginalized communities, the fear that existed in their eyes. And I wanted to hear from you all that it wasn't going to get as bad as it was. But y'all served as a reminder that it could easily happen. And I think that reignites the passion in myself, Mustafa, and Carmen to continue fighting for that change on our campus and to remind our peers that what we're doing right now matters, because we're not far from being where we were. So, thank you all.
I think something that we all kind of touched on is there is a current lack of understanding in where we are in society. So a lot of us may think that since we come from boycotts and things like the sit-ins and people being beaten, that we've come so far, which is true, we have come far. However, I think talking to other people who were around during the civil rights movement, they've expected us to come further than we are today. And it's really sad that we haven't gotten to that place. However, I think some things that we can do as students and as young activists and as people in general is to make sure that we are getting the knowledge ourselves, doing that can be different from each person. That could be critical research, that could be volunteering in places that need it, that could be student activism clubs. Personally, I think that something that's really important to me is getting a seat at the table, and that's not, like we said earlier, that is not taking a seat from someone else. It's, for me, getting that seat so I can give seats to others, and also disrupting the system. One thing that I've always taken with me that someone once said is man made these systems when it comes to like systematic oppression, and man can change those systems. So that's always my goal, to get to the table and disrupt it and change the system.
My mother was born in LaGrange, Georgia, and they had to pay a poll tax to vote. And I asked her, well, Mama, how much was the tax? She said, it was a dime. She said, but it took me a whole year to save that dime. I said, a whole year to save 10 pennies? She said, I was only making 20 cents a week. And my mother died, she was 98 years old. And we told her that she was going to be the first one in the family to reach 100. She said, well, I'm tired. And she moved to Knoxville in 1941. She registered, I have her voter's registration card at home now. She registered to vote in October of 1947. And I still have that card. To show you how serious she was about voting. She said the most powerful weapon that you can have is your choice and your right to vote. She was scheduled for an angioplasty on her heart. And she looked at the doctor, she said, I'm sorry, you're going to change that day. And he asked her why. She said, because that's election day. He wanted her to be there at 8. She said, but the polls don't open until 8. My mother never, ever missed an election day. And when she heard Barack Obama speak, anytime he was on television, you had to be quiet. I'm going to say it like she said, that was her Negro. and she was gonna vote for him. He gonna be president one day. But bless her heart, she died in June the year he was elected. And everybody might think that I was crazy, but I took the newspaper. The number was great, and I read it to her. I said, your Negro is president of the United States. And if anybody had seen me in Christian Cemetery meeting, you sent them over my mama's grave, and they would stop to the man with the net. She was ousted. But I vote. I work as a registrar, and it really irks me. In the black neighborhood, early vote, we didn't even have 350 people to register to vote in early vote. I worked this year in Sequoia Hill. We had almost 800 people to vote. 800 people. And we can't even get 200 or 300 to come to our polling places to vote. Remember, y'all, if you got voting coming up in November, vote blue.
I have to.
Mustafa has one final comment. This is going to be the final comment for our questioning session for the panelists. But I want to hear some questions from the audience as we wrap up after Mustafa.
I just wanted to see, because I heard it spoken here about, I think you mentioned it like a mass meeting that happened. And I think that's what we have, that's what's absent now. And when we talk about organizing, when we talk about getting people to the polls, I think that's something important that we need to bring back to today. So it's more so a question, not me necessarily stating anything, but how can we bring that back? How can we bring that mass meeting back to where we get community partners, where we get students on campus to get out to the polls, to register to vote, and to see how they can be a catalyst for the change of the issues that are happening in the community. So that's just for everybody.
My suggestion to begin with, and of course there's no one way to do this, but my suggestion would be for young people such as yourselves to instill in your friends and classmates and whoever you meet of the importance of making your voice heard. If you do not vote, if you are eligible and you do not register, if you are registered and you do not vote, then you vote by default for whoever wins, and that may or may not be your choice. So that's why you have to exercise your right. And I have to say though, when you were talking about your mother, my mother passed away in 2011 at age 101. And she would always say, I thought I'd see this day when she'd look at or listen to President Obama.
We stayed at the street.
From my mother?
The vacant lot, the corner of Robbins,
No, not my mother.
Okay, I got you talking about your father. Is she burning up?
No.
I'm sorry.
No, but that's okay. But it's just that mother connection that just reminded me of that. But always remind your peers that if you do not vote, if you are eligible and you do not cast your ballot, then you vote by default for whoever wins.
Can students vote absentee ballot or the mail ballot? Do it.
I would like to thank everybody at the table for so much important information. I grew up in northern New Hampshire, town of 20,000 people. There was not a single non-Caucasian in the whole community, and I never knew. And you have enlightened me. I also would like to say I am the Civil War curator here at the museum, and the history of the African American community in Knoxville is so deep that when you forget, you lose so much. But in 1864, as soon as it was possible, there was a regiment of African American soldiers formed here in Knoxville. There was a large freedmen's village on the south side of the river. People who came and worked for the Army and had a large farm to grow their own food. And that Civil War history is lost. When I started studying the Civil War history in Knoxville, nobody knew about that.
And that's the
And that's American history. That is our total history. And that whole segment was put aside. I don't know why people didn't know it. They didn't know. And so we're working here at the university to transcribe the regimental records. Where do I go? This way? That way? Anyway, I'm gonna stop talking about it. I thank all of you for being so honest and telling me about a time I really had no understanding of. Thank you.
I'm a student at the University of Tennessee, and like I said, we have a really big problem with talking to people or having these like conversations about getting us together and not following like actions. And I see that on social media, when we talking to people when I or not talking to people when I pass them, people of color, people who look like me. And I find it's really hard as someone who wants to bring people together through writing and through literature. It's really hard to get up and band together and see that we all have a common goal. So what does that look like outside of just words? Like, what do our actions look like instead of just saying we're going to get a crowd together? What does that look like on the University of Tennessee's campus?
What that looks like is what we're doing right now. Because as soon as we get the fever, we go out and we tell other people, and they get the fever. What we can do also is find organizations that are geared towards the types of things that you're wanting to do. If it's youth empowerment, get involved with the Emerald Youth Foundation. If you are visiting, the interesting thing about Knoxville is that all of these 130 churches came from about 5 churches: Mount Calvary, Payne Avenue, Mount Olive, Mount Zion, Rogers Memorial, Shallow, and Ebenezer. And
You be naming churches forever.
and those are just the, I was going to do a genealogy kind of sort of the churches. And so it was like, you got Mount Olive, and then it split, and then this side split, and then that side split, then you got Canaan, then you got Payne Avenue, Reverend Bailey left, this church. So, but get with some sort of civic organization that is geared towards the kinds of things you're interested in. Commit, even if it's no more than, for a few months. But for those few months, commit. And you will see the ones that would normally slack off. The ones that slack off and go, let them go. You didn't miss anything. Don't even waste your time chasing after them. Because when you start, your organization starts getting power and starts, moving forward, it's going to catch on.